Review code provided by the developer. I'm Jared.
I'm Marcus.
Level with us. Hello, and welcome to the show where we have a cozy yet dark conversation whenever we record. Today, we will be talking about a game called Wanderstop, and I personally consider this a very special game. The lead writer and creator of the game is named Davey Wreden, and Marcus, you and I think it's safe to say, are both big fans of his writing.
For sure.
He wrote the Beginner's Guide and the Stanley Parable, and this new game is not anything like those, but it still possesses, I think, his
wit, sensibility.
Yeah, I was going to say like his author's fingerprint.
Sure.
But the thing that makes it tricky to talk about with his games is, one of the central themes of his last game is to not overanalyze the author, right?
Right.
But I'm really excited to hear what your thoughts are on it as we review this. So, would you mind sharing with the listeners kind of what the premise of this game is?
Happy to. Yeah, Wanderstop is a cozy, narrative-driven game where you are a former warrior that is now working at a tea shop, and your character generally does not want to be there. So the narrative is very much about her struggling to find, the coziness of it all because she does not want to be in a tea shop and she does not want to be making tea. The moment-to-moment gameplay is all pretty relaxing, pretty cozy. You're just planting seeds, making tea, filling orders. There's no punishment for making the wrong tea, and you have as long as you want. So it very much is in the cozy style, but tackling some not often tackled themes and concepts, at least so far that I've seen in the cozy space.
Now, that brings up a good question. How familiar are you with the cozy space? How many cozy games do you play?
Well, it's a pretty broad, category. You can get a lot more specific with types of cozy games, so to speak. But I think of farming sims is kind of in this space. Spiritfarer, I think, is a good reference for this because that is also a narrative-driven, more cozy gameplay style game. But yeah, it's not like I'm well-versed in this space. It's not like I'm a big fan, but I definitely have experienced games that are similarly kind of built to be a relaxing experience.
Sure. And I think for the most part, this game succeeds in being a relaxing experience, despite having, definitely a darker and more serious story than I'm accustomed to. As far as cozy games go, I love Stardew Valley. That's kind of the quintessential one, and then obviously Animal Crossing, but I don't venture too far out beyond those. So to play a game like this that also has this type of narrative, this very, very character-driven narrative, is quite a treat. And, going into it, my expectations were, well, I like Davey Wreden, so, I'm probably going to like the writing of this game. And I can definitely say that the writing was my favorite part of the whole experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned Spiritfarer, and while I definitely don't want to compare experiences, that game does come to my mind in that it also has, a lot of writing, a lot of character exploration. But for Wanderstop at least, I was way, way more engaged with it. And I think the reason for that is the amount of humor in the game. I remember in one of my film classes, someone saying, you got to make people laugh to make them cry.
Mm-hmm.
And that was definitely true for me in this game. I verbally laughed out loud several times with Mariah as we kind of played through it together. And it really shines through. A lot of the gags are really great. There's a lot of, bonus conversations and pieces of writing that are very entertaining. And that just made me like the main character, Alta, so much more, was kind of seeing her, interactions with others. That made me more invested in her story because I was having such a good time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And to not beat around the bush, in case anyone is listening to this and wondering what the vague concept of dark themes means, it actually is very specific in kind of the story it's telling, I would say, its central story. And kind of it's also immediately apparent, so it's not much of a spoiler, but this is a story of dealing with burnout, feeling like your one thing that you do, the thing that defines you, is something that you've either, lost the ability to do or just feel yourself dying on the inside about. And it is very interesting the way that Davey Wreden openly acknowledges, yes, this is about my experience, because as you say, the beginner's guide very much kind of implies, let's not dig too much into games and psychoanalyze the people who made them.
Right.
But I think that there's an element in all three games that he has been a voice in that have very much tackled ideas. They've been kind of philosophical. They've been focused on themes and questions.
Sure. And I think that's a really smart way of putting it. A lot of ideas, a lot of questions. Like you said, philosophy is all about asking questions, and there's a lot of questions this game asks that it doesn't necessarily answer by the end. But a lot of things to chew on, a lot of things to think about, which is appropriate because a lot of this game is about quiet reflection. And I think that, a tea shop is a very good setting for that. One of the mechanics of the game is when you brew the tea, there's different fruits and plants you can include. And each one gives Alta specific dialogue, or rather, if she drinks her own tea, she'll sit down somewhere and reflect on something. And sometimes it's silly, sometimes it's very serious. And it builds her character, and it's also really interesting to have that sprinkled throughout. I assume that you did that a few times in your playthrough.
Yeah, there are definitely poignant moments throughout. I think you're right when you say that, kind of its off-kilter kind of silliness leaves you vulnerable for it to make you feel, care about the characters or really try to empathize with them.
Right. And I realize we've mostly just talked about the narrative so far in broad strokes. Obviously, we're trying not to spoil too much. But I guess to discuss the gameplay just a little bit, when you're making tea, you have to gather the leaves, which is not something you can grow. You just have to gather it. So it kind of forces you to leave, go to the outskirts of the clearing you're in. You make plants and hybrids by planting them in specific arrangements, which is really interesting. You have a nice logbook to help you with that. And then you have this really cool machine that requires several steps that you do in order to get the tea the way it should be. And there's various customers, different wacky characters that come visit the shop that kind of wander into it and request a specific flavor, and you learn more about them. And it's very solid. It's not a very long game. The embargo information we were given puts the gameplay at around 10 to 15 hours. I think I completed it in a little less than that, but I was also, trying to complete it in time for this review. So I think definitely take your time when you play this game, but that's a pretty accurate estimate. But yeah, solid gameplay. But again, it was the narrative that was keeping me going, that made me want to see more and more.
Yeah, I think I would call the gameplay, at least some of the gameplay, intentional tedium.
Yeah.
Where in some ways you know exactly what you need to do. So you're not really problem solving. Aside from occasionally, someone will ask for a tea and you have to think about which tea you want to make for them. Otherwise, there's really not too much to think about. There's a guidebook that tells you the order to plant the plants in for certain fruit. When you go to the machine, it's the same, 4 steps. So I say intentional tedium, not as a criticism, but I think kind of a central philosophy of the game is kind of just, you're not here for a challenge, you are here for an experience.
Yeah.
So I also was, definitely more propelled by the narrative. Didn't actually care much for some of the beautifying the tea shop and things like that. But it, I think, does what it wants to do, which is something I really think I like about smaller games, independent games, is they can kind of tackle one or two things in the way that they want to, rather than like these really big AAA games that will try to do everything. It's like, well, we need a crafting system. Well, we need, this, that. We need to add in, because every video game has this. When a game like this can be like, no, there's one specific story at the center of everything, and the gameplay isn't going to be anything more or less than it needs to be. It's just going to be some hurdles to jump through, enough to make you feel satisfied when you complete the individual requests.
Right. And I think if there's anyone who's a cozy gamer that, loves this type of game, I think it's important to come in with the expectation of this is a finite experience. There are moments where the game lets you just continue doing what you're doing, but there is an end goal. There is an ending to the game, if that makes sense.
Right. Especially comparing this to Animal Crossing or Stardew Valley, where it's like, oh, you set your own objectives. This game is also like kind of objective light. It's not like these really hard goals that you're trying to go to. It's kind of just doing one thing at a time. But like you say, yeah, you're headed towards an ending, which kind of puts it more in the narrative space than the cozy for the sake of cozy space.
Yeah. With that in mind, I think we've kind of covered the basics of what we think. Let's get into the really hyper-specific details with star pieces. This is the part of the show where we talk about some cool little detail or something we think was neat in our playthrough. How about you start us?
Sure. My star piece is whenever in a dialogue tree you have the chance to continue a list longer than really is reasonable. Because what person isn't going to go through the list? I would be really interested to see the data. But for example, one of the first characters you meet is like, want to see a picture of my son? And then you're given the dialogue choice, show me more. And then he shows you another and it's funny. And so you can say, show me more. And so this guy will pull out like 8, custom drawn art things that you would totally miss if you do what the character would do, which is say, my gosh, please stop.
Yes.
But instead, and this is one of several instances where you can let a character keep talking.
Just keep going. Yes. And it's a treat. It's such a treat.
Right, exactly. The star piece is they usually get either consistently funny or sometimes funnier as you go along. Like it's always a joke when you can like continue on a list. So
yes,
that's my star piece.
That specific interaction you're mentioning, I think, is where I laughed the hardest while playing this game. It's just so cute how much this dad loves his son that he's willing to wake him up in the middle of the night and take selfies with him because of how much he loves him. It's beautiful and funny and great. And I ended up taking he gave me one of those photos of him buying way too many bags of corn flour, and I put that on my wall in my tea shop to look at. It was delightful. Moments like that, I'm like, this is what I came here for. Just the jokes that go on for too long. I don't remember if there's a lot of. I think there's plenty of those in the Stanley Parable, but like
Yes.
Portal 2 has a penchant for doing that too, and I just love it. I love that type of humor.
I think that Davey is at this point, I don't know if known for it, but it's something that Stanley Parable definitely sets up, and this game as well, where it's like, you're never going to catch the game with its pants down. You're never going to like do something that the game doesn't call you out on for doing.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
If you want to keep asking for more, it's going to give you more for a while.
Yes. My star piece is kind of interesting because you said that the main character clearly would say, oh my gosh, please stop, even though you keep going. There were moments like that in the game where I actually kind of felt like I needed to roleplay Alta, where I felt like I just needed to select the dialogue she would say, if that makes sense.
Right. Yes.
And one of the things that helped me is this tiny, tiny little detail, and it's that characters that enter the clearing will go straight up to you, no matter what you're doing. So right at the beginning, when Alta's like, I don't want to be here, I guess I have to plant a few things in order to leave, I just started like planting dozens and dozens of plants in one tiny spot. And then a customer came right up to me and just stared at me while I was busy. And I'm like, okay, she would definitely be annoyed at this. And then the dialogue seemed to reflect that, and it just felt immersive, if that makes sense. Later on, there was plenty of times where she was reflecting, she was drinking tea on a bench, thinking about it like a really, like a traumatic childhood memory. And then, a character would walk right up to her, but her dialogue was still going, so I wouldn't stop it. And then I'd see that character walk away. And again, just this tiny detail, this tiny choice to have a character walk up to Alta wherever she's at, but that it made me feel like that was a part of the story, if that makes sense.
I like that. Yeah, that's a cool detail.
So that's our star pieces, and I think with that we will get into our quick jabs.
And jab.
This is where we talk about something maybe we didn't like so much in our play experience, and I felt like my star piece was pretty minor. My quick jab is also pretty minor. And in fact, I'd go as far as to say if this was something that was intentional in the game. Basically, there's a few moments in the game where you meet a character who has a really cool design, and you don't get to learn anything about them because the story has to move on. And that bummed me out because I was like, oh, but look at this! You designed this really cool character. But the narrative, without spoiling anything, the narrative demanded that we move on, and I wasn't able to spend time with that character at all. And so while that irked me, like I said, I felt like that was pretty intentional.
Mm-hmm.
But what's your quick jab?
Sometimes the movement was a bit clunky to me. Like, I'd want to get somewhere and you can't jump, so you kind of get caught behind something. Or you're trying to interact with a specific object, and you have to position yourself just right to pull the lever instead of grab the cup.
Yeah.
So occasionally that was a little more fiddly than I would like it to be.
Sure.
Also, though, with the type of game it is, it's like, it's not really about precise movement and interaction. That wasn't the hugest deal, but something I would have liked maybe to see a bit better.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And that brings us to our last segment, which is Who's the Fake Fan?
Fake fan.
This is where we quiz each other with nerdy trivia questions. I got a really, really short one, so it's up to you if you want me to go first or if you want me to go second.
Go ahead. Yeah, go first.
Okay. Well, I assume, because you're Marcus, that you read some of the hard-boiled super spy novels that the game has to offer. Is that right?
Yes, I read through the first one. I skimmed through the second one. Almost put it as my star piece, that it has really stupid novels that you can read.
That was my star piece originally too, because I've already talked about how much I love the writing. So it's just like the cherry on top that you can collect books in the game, just chock full of writing. But my question is very simple. What is the name of the hard-boiled super spy that serves as the main character of the series of books you encounter? Here are your options.
I might be able to do it without.
Okay. Well, I mean, I prepared these options. But
okay. No, I want to hear them. I want to hear the options.
I worked really hard on these fake ones.
You came up with really cute names, I bet.
Yeah, this is what I came up with. We have Rick Holster, we have Dirk Warhard, we have Mark Riker, and we have Mac Hardscrabble.
Well, that last one you and I both know is from a different IP. His name is Warhard. I remember noticing the name and being like, gosh, that's such a hard-boiled name.
You are, of course, correct. I just thought it was interesting that when we brainstormed the name Mac Hardscrabble, we were trying to come up with a one-syllable masculine-sounding name, and we came up with Mac, and this book has Dirk, and it makes sense.
And we also had Hard Scrabble, and this has
Warhard. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So hard shows up in both. It's a two-word phrase.
That first novel was my favorite one, but I'm excited for you to get to the third one because it's not a novel about Dirk Warhard. It's an insane, in-depth analysis of the author of the Warhard books.
Oh.
And it goes deep. It's fascinating and really, really interesting.
Gosh, yeah. Dialogue writing, that's
absurdist.
The
it's
cream
great.
of this stuff, yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a question for me?
I do. So you have a couple hours of experience of giving teas based on requests. So I thought I would ask you if I hypothetically came up to your tea shop and I said, hey, I'm looking for a tea that can return my thoughts to a time of innocence. Would you want to give me a bite berry tea, a mess berry tea, Riedel beet tea, or a hell melon tea?
Yeah, I remember all of these, but I don't remember which one's which. I don't think it's biteberry, if I remember right. Biteberry is like flavorless. I think Pellmelon is something different, something silly. What were my other two options?
Riedel beet, mess berry.
I used the Riedel beet a lot early game, but I don't remember what it does. I think messberry feels right, so I'm just gonna go with messberry.
Wah, wah.
Ah,
Unfortunately, messberry is a taste that's impossible to quite place no matter how hard you think about it or what you compare it to, and it's known to infuriate some. So if you gave me that tea, I might have been somewhat disappointed.
oh no.
You were actually correct that biteberry tea is completely tasteless, but it also returns your thoughts to a time of innocence.
Okay, I remembered half the description, but not the other half. Gotcha.
I'll be honest, these descriptions of the fruits remind me a lot of brainstorming for the Rise of the Golden Idol, like coming up with ridiculous birds or ridiculous contraptions, where we'll be like, yeah this one just like, in an upcoming DLC, there's like, oh yeah, a nano civilization in a jar, just add water and you make a little mini civilization. You know, like we can just come up with a ridiculous throwaway thing because it adds flavor.
It does. No, that's cool. It's game recognized game, right? Like you're or artist recognize other artists with these wonderful fruit descriptions. When does the Rise of the Golden Idol DLC come out? Did the first pack just come out? Is that right?
The first DLC just came out. That's right.
Congrats. That's awesome.
Thanks.
I'm excited to eventually play through those. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Marcus. I
of course
very much enjoyed Wanderstop. I guess my final question would be, who do you think this game is for? Like, who would enjoy this game? Who would you recommend this to?
I think that anyone who's a fan of video games in the like hypothetical sense of like, I guess saying like, I want to see what kind of stories video games can tell, what kind of experiences they can have. People who are the type where they're like, yeah, I'll try an indie game of any sort if it's doing something new or interesting. Of course, also, I think cozy gamers would enjoy it specifically, but I think just anyone who's interested to explore more about the types of stories that video games can tell will enjoy this.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I asked Mariah right before we started recording who she thinks this game would appeal to, and she said people who like cozy experiences but are looking for more, perhaps something more to chew on, more of a bite to them. And I concur. As we've talked many times already, you know, I love Davey Wreden's writing. I think anyone who is a fan of him or a fan of Annapurna, who publishes really, really excellent games and published this one, will absolutely enjoy what Wanderstop has for them. So with that, instead of leaving with the credits music that we usually do on this show, I would like to also take a moment to spotlight some of the music from this game. The composer, C418, is known for Minecraft, but he also composed the soundtrack for this game. It's really excellent. It's very vibey. I think we're going to play a little excerpt that'll kind of give you a feel for not only the soundtrack, but just the feel of the game, where you'll hear some lightness, but also some, dark synthy stuff underneath. And we'll end the show that way. Did you enjoy the music? I forgot to ask you. What did you think of it?
Absolutely. Really solid. One detail that I thought was really cool, some video games do this, but I was really happy to see it here. Whenever you talk to a character, they'll often have their own music track, and rather than just fading away when you stop talking to them, it will play to the end of a phrase and then play like a conclusion to the music. So it's dynamic in that way, where it like plays a little bit longer, so as you're walking away, you can still hear the vibe of the music, and then it will end like intentionally, not just fade away.
It has like a coda that it'll snap to.
Exactly.
It's beautiful.
That's right.
Awesome. Well, like I said, we'll go ahead and play an excerpt. But until next time, I'm Jared,
I'm Marcus.
and we will level with you then.